I'm Cappy from Always in Stitches, and you were just looking at all the amazing accessories and feet and toys, we call the toy box, that comes with this fabulous Elna Excellence 680 Plus machine. We recently started carrying this in our store, and we're really excited about the machine. As a matter of fact, it was so exciting, 2 of our staff members bought the machine the same day we got it, so we had to order even more in, which always makes us happy. But that's kind of a statement of what we really think about this machine if we had 2 staff members buy it immediately. And they've been very pleased with it. So we're excited to become an Elna dealer now. And so we'll be carrying several other machines in the Elna line. But this is the first one we got in, and we've been really excited. We've sold several. Because of the current situation, we haven't been able to get those people in for classes. So this video is going to kind of serve 2 purposes. If you've bought the machine and you haven't got to take your class, hopefully I'll answer some questions about how to operate the machine so you can use it. Or if you're thinking about it, this might be a chance for you to look at it and say, okay, that has all the stuff I need so I can make the best sewing projects possible. So I always start at the very beginning. You know, was it Mary Poppins, I think, said start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, and it really is, especially when you buy these new sewing machines that have so many features in them that sometimes it can feel overwhelming. But at the end of the day, it's still a sewing machine. It's built the same inside. It works just like any other machine you would have owned. It just has some extra toys to play with to make it really fun. So I'm going to start at the beginning, basically with the on-off switch, because that's the first thing you've got to figure out. So Peter's behind the camera. He's going to pan around here and show you how some of these wonderful features work. So on the end of the machine right here, you can see is your on-off switch. So on, off, on. This is the power cord that plugs in right here, that plugs into the wall. And then here is where my foot pedal can plug in. Now I'm kind of over foot pedals, I guess you could say. There is a stop-start button on the front of the machine, and I prefer not to use the foot pedal any longer because what I've learned is I sit differently in my chair when I don't have to reach to find that foot pedal, and I can sew longer. Sewing longer is always my goal. So I like the way the stop-start button. If you've got a machine with one on it, try using it. You might find you like it. The other switch I want to show you that's over on this end of the machine is the feed dog up and down. So if I push this to the side, I heard the machine make a lock sound, and what it's done is it's dropped the feed dogs. You can tell by the picture they're dropped. When I push it back, it doesn't make any noise yet because that's a mechanical feature, but the machine, once it takes the first stitch, will then raise the feed dogs again. So a lot of you doing free motion quilting, that's a great way to accomplish that. And it's a nice feature to have with any machine. For sewing on buttons, I can drop my feed dogs, free motion quilting. A lot of art quilters will use no feed dogs so you can really move the fabric the way you want. But it's a real easy switch to do that. But to bring the feed dogs back up, I'm going to push the needle up and down button once, and that raises my feed dogs because, again, it's a mechanical part, not an electronic part of the machine. So we know how to turn it on. We know how to plug in or not plug in the foot pedal. The other accessory that's kind of interesting is this. This is what's called a knee lift. Now, I've been around a while, so I remember in the day when we had this attached to our sewing machines, and what it was an on-off switch. It allowed you to start sewing or stop sewing. Well, they've kind of changed that, I think, for security reasons. Basically, you bump into it and you have your hand under there, you might sew your finger. Not that I've ever done that, but, you know, maybe. So anyway, what this does as a knee lift is it adjusts. So there's a screw on this that I can loosen or tighten, and hopefully I can, loosen it up a little bit. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, that still applies. And then I can slide this, and what happens when I put this in the machine is, for instance, if my knee were to bump that, when it's over this far, it's a little far for me to reach. But if I move this out, see how it adjusts that position? So it's fully adjustable knee lift. I can tell you that I have gotten to where my knee lift is just the best because what it does now, it lifts and raises and drops the presser foot. So this really gives me hands-free sewing. Not only have I eliminated having to push the foot pedal, but now whenever I press my knee against this, my foot pedal goes up and down, or my presser foot goes up and down. The funny thing is if I happen to be sewing on a machine that doesn't have a knee lift, I'm swinging that knee to hit that knee lift that isn't there. It's funny how we get used to where the turn signals are on our machines. But it's much like in a car, when you buy a new car and the turn signal's on the left instead of the right or whatever. You never quite find the gears. But eventually, it gets very routine. I don't even think about hitting the knee lift now. It's just part of my driving my sewing machine. I am going to take that off now for demonstration purposes just because I'm going to be moving around. I don't want to bump into it. But it does come in and out easily, and it is adjustable. So that's one of the great pieces comes with this machine. So now let's talk about the actual machine, what she has with her. She's nice and smooth. She's solid, but she's not overly heavy. You could take her to class. She comes with a carrying case, which is really a nice feature to be able to put your machine inside and take around with you. It has nice pouches on the outside to put all your supplies. It also has a little bag to put all your accessories in if you want to take them with you. Although there are also, and I call this the porches of the machine. So you have what is the free arm, or what is called a free arm, because you can take this off of the machine, and now I have an area where I can do sleeves and cuffs and small little things. But if I leave that on the machine, it gives me a nice place for my accessories. So I call this the upstairs. This is the upstairs level. You can see my bobbins would fit in there. My little, well, usually this will fit in there. Something will fit in there. Different things you can put. Your feet will lay down in here. And then additionally you have, this is the upstairs, then this is the basement down here. And you can see I have the buttonhole foot, which is a really well-built buttonhole foot. If you do much garment sewing, you'll love this buttonhole foot. That can go in there. There's a little place here that there's a spool. This is an additional spool holder that will fit down in here. And it's kind of like a tinker toy. You need your kindergartner to figure out how to put it all together, but this will all fit in there so that there's no space wasted. And then under here is an additional foot plate. So what you find sometimes when you're stitching, especially if you're doing the corners or angles or half square triangles, the fabric, when you're using, and I'll show you the other foot plate, when you're using this foot plate where the actual foot is open like this, your fabric will suck down into that hole, so that when I'm sewing, I get that little corner of the fabric that just wants to slide down in that hole when you start stitching, and it'll go right down in there. So what happens with this foot is these supporting pieces right here allow you to have an opportunity to not have to be concerned about that fabric getting stuck. And this is a quick change. This is super, super nice. So let's say I'm quilting and I have the wide open. I've been doing zigzag stitches. Now I'm ready to do some piecing. I just push this button right here. It unlocks that foot, which lifts out very easily, which also is a great way for me now to do my cleaning. If I want to take my bobbin case out, clean this area, keep it nice and tidy, put that back in. There's a little red dot right here. And this red dot matches that red dot so that I know I've positioned that bobbin back in place. Now I can put the other foot plate in, and it just sets down, push, and I've changed my foot plate. Makes it very easy to change between different feet and different sewing techniques. The nice thing too is it also locks out the machine, so there are certain stitches you obviously can't do with this particular thing. The machine will recognize that and not sew, so you don't break a needle. So I'm going to replace it because this demonstration I'm going to do today, we're going to use the other one. And then this just stores right here in your free arm, which is really nice. Especially if you're taking it to class, you can have everything all together. So I'm going to put my foot plate back in. There we go. So that's kind of the general body parts of this machine. So let's look at some of the other parts that come convenient with it. It's going to thread very simply, and I'll go through threading in just a minute as far as how to put your thread on the machine. But let me talk about this dial right here. What this does is it allows you to adjust the pressure of the presser foot. Say that 4 times in a row. Pressure, presser, presser. But sometimes when I'm working on really thick fabrics or flannel or maybe vinyl, leather, something heavy that I want to push through, I need to reduce the space between my, put this back on, the space between the bottom of the presser foot and the foot plate of the machine. So this dial, what it does is when I drop this presser foot, it allows the pressure to not be so tight. So thick pieces of fabric can move freely through. And typically if I'm doing quilting and piecing, I'm not going to adjust this dial much. I personally make a lot of handbags and do some garment sewing, so this dial is helpful for me so I can adjust that presser foot pressure so my fabric feeds effectively through, whether it's thick or thin. So that's a nice dial to have on your machine. Additionally, up here we have our tension dial. If this has an auto tension, most sewing machines made throughout the international world right now have an auto feature on them because the machines are able to adjust based on what you're doing. I wouldn't adjust my tension dial unless I'm working with extremes in fabric. And that's a technique that we can work with and show you how to adjust your tension dial. But typically your auto tension is going to be just fine. If you have a machine that doesn't have auto tension, usually between 3, 4, and 5, depending on what you're sewing. But the auto tension is a wonderful feature because I don't have to think about it. As we go across the front of the machine, there's some other features I want to show you. This is the thread cutter. I love my thread cutter because it allows me to minimize the amount of thread that I use. And I'm going to demonstrate it here in just a second. This is your needle up and down button. So every time I touch that, the needle goes up or down. This replaces our hand wheel. For years, and I mean a long time I've been sewing, we used to always turn the hand wheel when we wanted to move the needle up or down. It was just instinct. You reach over, you turn the hand wheel up and down. Well, they've made that a little quicker for you now. You just push this button. And what happens when you push that button is it happens electronically in the machine. So I encourage all our consumers to use the needle up and down button because it keeps it in sync with the computer. You can certainly use the hand wheel, but when you use the hand wheel, it's a mechanical part of the machine, just like when you drop the feed dogs with that lever. It's a mechanical part of the machine. The machine needs to catch up with the computer. That's why we have this the up and down button. And it's just quick, it's easy. I just pop that. And if I'm doing applique work, I can just go one stitch at a time. So I can get to the end of a seam and I can just stitch back and forth a couple times if I want, or if I'm gonna pivot at an edge and I've gone too far over, like doing my binding, I can go back one or go forward one, whichever I need to do, and get my fabric to line up perfectly. So this is a great little button. The next button I wanna talk about is this bullseye. And what it does is it stops and locks your stitch. So I can use this at the beginning to lock a stitch. I can sew, and then I can come to the end and I can lock the stitch. If I'm doing a decorative stitch, it will complete the pattern and then lock the stitch. I'll show you that in a minute too. Additionally, this U-turn, I call this the U-turn button. This is the reverse. So if I'm sewing and I want to go backwards, I just push that button in and I hold it until I don't want to go backwards anymore. When I let go, she goes forward again. And then the stop-start button is what I was talking about that replaces the foot pedal. This is my favorite button. I can't tell you how much I love being able to use that. And then we go down in here, we have the needle threader and some other things. I'm actually going to fill a bobbin and thread the machine so you can see how these work. But I wanted to give you an idea of some of these buttons. Additionally, this is our speed governor right here. It shows a turtle for turtle slow and a hare for funny fast. But let me tell you, you win the race either way. So don't ever feel like I have to sew fast or I have to sew slow. Whatever speed you sew is the okay speed. It's just allowing you to have an opportunity to figure out what works for you. Typically, there's not very many times that I have to sew bunny fast because I'm doing this to enjoy it, and bunny fast sometimes doesn't give me the best stitches that I can get. So typically, I'm going to be in the middle of this somewhere, kind of between the two. But I have the option, especially when you're teaching small children, the turtle slow is a wonderful opportunity because even if I push the foot pedal all the way down to the floor, if I have this set at turtle slow, it will never go any faster. So this speed governor is a wonderful feature that helps the foot pedal work more effectively, or if you're using the stop-start button, allows you to adjust your speed. So that's kind of the front of the machine. We'll get into this whole part over here that is the kind of the heart of the machine and where you pick your stitches in a minute. Right now I'd like to show you how to thread. So one of the things that's real important when using any of the current sewing machines, as a matter of fact, I had an old treadle machine and it said always use the best quality fabric you can afford and the best quality thread that you can afford. And that book for that machine was from the 1880s, so some things haven't changed. The particular thread we like best of all is called Orifel. It's a nice weight. It stays nice and thin and disappears when you're doing quilting. It's great in garments. It's the same effect. What I like about it is it gives me the weight, it gives me the size, it tells me the gram, the weight of the thread, and if it's a 2-ply or a single ply. I can always find the color easily. And for this spool, you get a lot of thread. A lot of thread. It goes a long way. When I empty one of these, they're little trophies. I feel like I've won an award every time I get one of these emptied. It's like an Academy Award. I emptied another spool. I sewed that much. So what happens when sometimes we get this thread is you can't find the end. And so the end pops off of this, just like that, and I can find the end of my thread, which is somewhere. There she is. Okay, so there's the end of my thread, and I just pop this back on, and now I'm ready to sew. So this machine has a couple choices on where to put my thread. There's an extra post that comes right here that I can put it if I would like horizontal. There's also, you can attach to the back of this as an accessory a thread stand if you would rather have your threads upright. There's 2 screws that come out here, and there's a plate that would attach here that would have posts that you could put thread to if you would prefer to have your thread going upright like this. But this is perfectly fine. So first thing we're gonna do is fill a bobbin, because whenever I get a new spool of thread, I always fill 2 or 3 bobbins, because I know as I use this spool of thread, I'm always gonna need the bobbin, and I don't have to stop and refill. So this lifts up a little bit so I can put it in. I get 3 spool head covers with this, and I'll show you those right here in my little hand. So there's 3 of them for different size threads. One is not better or more important than the other. They just serve different functions based on the type of thread that you're using. For this particular thread, I'm going to choose this spool cap because it seats down inside. My goal is to not have that thread spool wiggle around. So I'm going to tap that in really good and tight so my thread stays stationary. So the spool doesn't move, but the thread comes off of it. That's really important. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the directions, and I'm not sure how well they're photographed because they're white on white, but I'm going to follow the directions of how to thread my bobbin. And there's little dots that a dotted line is for the bobbin and the solid line is for the thread. So I'm going to start my threading following the diagram that is exactly on the machine, which is super nice because I don't have to think about it. What I want to do is there's a tension disc in there, and I kind of want to floss it like flossing my teeth to make sure that that thread goes through that tension disc. If it doesn't go through the tension disc, I'm not going to get a well-wound bobbin, and that's going to cause me trouble long term. The other nice feature about this machine is right here, this little post is actually a thread cutter. So I can cut my thread. Now, because I had such a long piece and I didn't want to go that far around my bobbin, I'm going to tug on this a little bit so I can kind of feel it's through the tension disc. And then there's a couple ways to thread a bobbin. You can run the thread up through the middle and through the little holes that are in the bobbin like this. That's perfectly fine if you want to do it. But I've done this long enough. I usually put the bobbin on here and I wrap this around 2 or 3 times. And then I just hold the thread like this. So it's started already winding. And then I engage the bobbin like this. Now this is a good point for me to tell you. We get phone calls quite often from customers who say, my machine, I push the pedal and nothing happens, it's making noise and nothing happens. Many times the bobbin winder has been engaged, because when this is engaged, your needle doesn't move. So if that's a symptom you've got, typically this is the problem. So make sure this is not engaged, this is engaged. So now I'm ready to wind my bobbin. So I'm going to hold this over here, and I'm trying to do this without my hands blocking the view, so it makes things a little awkward. But I'm going to turn this down. I don't want to go bunny fast. Just because you have a Ferrari doesn't mean you go 300 miles an hour every day. I want to fill a bobbin at about a mid-weight speed. Can I fill it faster? Probably. Should I fill it faster? Where do you have to be? You're sewing. Take your time. Do the bobbin fill correctly. So now I'm going to hit the start, and she's going to take off. Oops, wait. There we go. Yeah, maybe she is. There we go. So now she's filling. Well, darn it. There we go. I had it catching because I didn't have it completely flat on there. So now it's filling, and as you can see, it kind of goes up and down, and it fills the bobbin in a nice even filling. If I'm getting it to fill too much on the bottom or too much on the top, I can always just lift this up a little bit and get it to where I want it to be. But I want it nice and flat and full. The other thing is I don't want to overfill a bobbin. That is not a good thing to do. I usually fill my bobbins about 3/4 of the way, and that's enough. Because if you overfill when you try and run it through your bobbin in the machine, put it in the bobbin holder, it tends to jam up. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm just going to lift this off, and I'm going to use that handy thread cutter right there and cut the thread. Now you can see when you look at this bobbin, I take my scissors, and it's firm. It's a nice solid bobbin. This little tail that's hanging out, I'm going to cut that right off because I don't want that getting in the way. And now my bobbin is nice and tight, and it's well wound. If I get a poorly wound bobbin, I can put the bobbin in here and rewind it again so I don't waste the thread. So now that I've wound my bobbin, I'm going to set it down here, and first thing I'm going to do is thread the machine. And this is just following the directions. It gives me the numbers. I'm going to pull this thread out, and typically when I'm threading, I pull out enough thread to get to the bottom, and I put my finger right here so I can have a little tension against that, so I can feel that the thread's going in where I want it to go. So there's 1, 2, and we're going to go all the way down here to 3. See the loop up. Now, when I'm threading my take-up lever, if I don't feel like it's in the right place or I don't know, I may put the needle up and down one time to make sure that that take-up lever is fully up. Then I go up here, and you can actually see the take-up lever. And then I come down to 5, and there's 1 right here. So this goes right underneath here. And then this is the part that kind of gets people a little confused sometimes. We're going to go up here and across. Okay? Wait, I missed a spot. I got to go right here. Yeah, no, that's right. Up and across and over. Okay? Then I bring the thread down. We may have to edit this. All right, one more time for the boys in the band. Down.
That's part of breaking in the machine.
It's part of breaking in the machine. Besides, that's what I didn't do. I didn't get down here. So see
It's
this one right
sneaky.
here?
It's got a
It's got a sneaky little bar right there. I missed that bar. Because then when I go up, then it catches right there and across here and up and over. Now we got her. And then I'm going to push this down, and it swings right into that needle eye with a little bitty hook, and it made a loop. See my loop right here? I'm going to pull that through. So you have to see how not to do it and how to do it. And that's how we thread the needle. That needle threader, again, I compare it to when you first start driving a car. I am one of those old people that was able to drive a clutch. I could drive a 5-speed or a 3-speed, no problem. Even on the wheel of the car, I could drive a car. After a while, if you drive a car with a clutch, you just don't even think about pushing the clutch in. You just do it. It's like the turn signals on your car. When you get ready to turn, hopefully, you just hit the turn signal. You don't even really think about it. Using a needle threader will become like that. They are intimidating to start, but just practice it, and you find that eventually it's just like turning on a turn signal. You just thread it, hit it, done it, you're on your way. Okay, so now that we've done the needle threader, I want to show you how you put your bobbin in. The nice thing about this is it has a great picture right here on the bobbin case that shows you exactly how to thread the bobbin. So what I want you to think about is the thread should come off of the left side of the bobbin so that it looks like the letter P. So here's the top of the P, and here's the straight stick on the P. And I'm just going to drop my bobbin right into there, and there's a tension disc right here, and I'm going to go up and around here. So I go up and around, and it shows me 1, 2, and I just pull it right here, and there's a really nice little thread cutter that just cut the thread for me. I put my bobbin case back on, and then I'm going to use this needle up and down button we talked about. So I'm going to hold my needle thread, I'm going to push the up and the down, and it's pulled up my bobbin, and there it is. Now, one of the things that gets kind of hard for people is when you use this thread cutter, the bobbin thread just barely peeks up to the top of machine. You may not even see the bobbin thread, but the machine's smarter than you are. She can always find that bobbin thread, so don't worry if you say, well, I don't have any bobbin thread hanging out, I only have a needle thread. That's okay. The machine can always find it because the way the hook rotary is designed. So now I'm ready to sew. That's the best part. We always want to start sewing. So let's start with some of the basic stitches. Over here, this machine has a little LED screen, and underneath it looks like almost like a calculator, and sometimes this scares people, but everything has a purpose and it's very simple to use. If you look at the door here, this opens and closes, it shows you the mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4, mode 5, mode 6. All of these, I want you to think about those as drawers. So mode 1 is a drawer, mode 2, they each are their own drawer, and within that drawer are files, and each of the files is a different stitch. So what I have to do is pick the drawer I want to be in and pick the stitch I want to do. And remember that straight stitch needle plate we talked about? There it shows you right there the stitches that will work for that straight stitch needle plate. So if I put that on, I know I can use these stitches without damaging the machine. So I'm going to choose in mode 1, stitch 1. So that takes me now down to the LED screen here. I have a stylus because using the stylus kind of helps the screen not get tired, and it keeps it clean and helps me be exactly specific where I want to be. So right now, if you look here, this little drawer, and it's a little tab hanging out, says mode 1, and it matches here where it says mode. Every time I touch mode, it goes to a different drawer, a different mode. So I'm in mode 1, and I want to do stitch number 1. Well, I'm in mode 1, now here's stitch 1. If I wanted to choose another stitch, I'm going to come down here and pick the number. So any of the stitches in mode 1 with these numbers, every time I push the numbers for the stitch number, I can look up here and tell what that stitch is. So I'm going to pick stitch 1, which is a straight stitch. The nice thing is, now I know I'm in mode 1, I'm doing stitch 1, and the machine recommends that I use the foot A. Foot A happens to be on it. Here's foot A right now. You can see the letter A right in there. And every time I put a new foot on the machine, I always know that I can read the letter just as I'm looking at it. It doesn't go upside down like this. It goes like this, so I can read the letter. So I'm in stitch mode 1, stitch 1, and I'm using foot A. So far, so good. Everybody's happy. Now, I can also choose the position where and this picture right here shows you the stitch, and it's sort of square, so it's a little confusing to look at, but it's facing it sideways, so this is the front of the machine, you're looking to the back. So here is the hole in the presser foot, and this is the stitch coming through, so that's what you're looking at. Then this tells me the stitch width. This is a 9mm machine, which is a really generous foot. It's great because it holds your fabric flat when you're sewing. So this 4.5 millimeters tells me the foot is in the dead center. If it's 9, half of that's 4.5, that's dead center. If I wanted to change that, I just use these up and down buttons to make the number bigger. So I'm going to show you here how the number changes, and then I'm going to have Peter go to the needle so you can see how it moves. So if I make this number bigger, the needle moves to the right. If I make this number smaller, the needle moves to the left. So I'm going to start in the middle, and then Peter's going to go down and show you the needle moving while I move these buttons. So why would I want to move my needle over? Well, here's why I move my needle over, because I want to do a 1/4 inch stitch, and I want to use the edge of my foot to tell me where the 1/4 inch stitch should be. So if I start stitching here, the distance from here to my needle has changed because I moved my needle position over. And I can create my 1/4 inch stitch. Or if I'm doing top stitching, I can sew with my fabric along the edge here, and then move the needle over, sew it here, and then move the needle over here, and I can sew the fabric in the same side against the side of the foot, but I've created top stitching and I don't have to do anything except guide the fabric in the same place. That's why you move your needle around. Okay, we're gonna go back to the center, 4.5. If you have a 7mm machine, it's 3.5. If you have a 5mm machine, it's 2.5. It's simply math, not too tough. Now then, this next button right here is 2.4. That's my stitch length. And same thing applies. Bigger number is going to give me bigger stitches. Smaller number is going to give me smaller stitches. The good news is she knows what stitches can be changed. So some of these decorative stitches in here are not going to allow you to change these widths and lengths because it will jam up the way the stitch looks. It won't be a pretty stitch. The machine can do it, but it's not really going to look like you want it to. So those are kind of the basics you got to start. How do I find the stitch? How do I change the needle position? How do I change the stitch length? And then this button right here, see how there's a scissor right there now? It's set to automatically cut when I stop sewing. So I don't have to stop and hit that cut button every time. It just knows when I get to the end and use the bullseye stitch to stop, it will cut the thread for me, which is a wonderful little gift. So let me show you how to sew with this. So I have about 4 layers of fabric here just to sew on to start. I'm going to place my foot. Now if I had my knee lift in, I would be using my knee lift to put the presser foot up and down, but since I don't, I'm just going to go like this and drop it with the lever in the back. And to start my stitch, if I wanted to start sewing, I'm just going to push the start button. She's awfully quiet. Now, right now she's kind of not real fast, but we can go super fast. We can go really slow. Gives you some choices there. That's how that speed governor works. When I want to stop sewing, I just push the stop button. Now, I turned on the lock, remember, or I turned on the scissors, but the scissors didn't cut it because I didn't push the bullseye. So now I'm going to start sewing again. This is another case where I would want to pivot. So I've stopped, the needle's down. I could use my knee lift to pivot. I can turn. I can go another direction. I can sew a little bit. I can stop. I can turn. That's where that knee lift is awesome, because you see I'm having to put my hand up here. If I had the knee lift, I wouldn't have to. So now I'm going to start sewing again, but this time I'm going to start like this, and when I'm ready to stop, I'm going to push this bullseye. You see it's locking the stitch, and we're going to hear a click, and she cut the thread. So right now, there's the back where she knotted it and cut the thread. And we've got our perfect stitch. That's how you basically start sewing with it. Beyond that, there are so many accessories and feet that you can use with this machine. I'll go through some of these. The great thing is they have a really good website. You can enter the information. We teach you how to operate the machine, but how to do the techniques to use all these feet is a whole nother class. So let me just tell you a little bit about each one so that you understand how they work. Free motion quilting has become a really big deal right now, and what happens with this machine, and this is I think this is about an $80 foot. This comes with this foot that has the closed toe steel free motion foot. There's a little screw. I can take this off and I can replace it with the open toe, or I can replace it with the marked one. And this is great when you're doing free motion quilting, because this gauge allows you to surround and do echo quilting or keep track of where you're quilting when you go between lines. It's a great feature. I love that about this machine. And this would do beautiful free motion quilting. You've got plenty of light and you've got plenty of room. This is the glide foot. I'm going to use that for leather or vinyl sewing. It's a Teflon foot. It's very slippery on the bottom. It allows fabrics that might be a little sticky to push through quickly. This is your open toe embroidery foot or decorative stitch foot. So this allows me to see the stitches when I'm sewing so that they can go through, and there's a little valley back here so the thread can, once you've made the stitch, it allows it to pass through evenly. This is the stitch in the ditch foot. It can also be used to make a blind hem, which is a wonderful thing. When you learn how to make a blind hem on a sewing machine, you'll never hand sew a hem again. But this has a couple uses. This is a gathering foot, so the fabric catches in here and it will gather. It makes a nice gather, not as nice as you can get on a serger, but it certainly is effective. This is to sew on buttons. Okay, funny story. When I bought my most recent sewing machine, my husband, I had a stack of shirts to sew buttons on, and I despise hand sewing. And so he had this stack of shirts that I was supposed to be sewing buttons on, and I hadn't because I'm not that perfect wife. Surprise. And so I got my new machine and I had this foot and I sat down and I literally sewed like 20 shirts, all the buttons back on the shirts, and I brought them to him and he's like, how did you do that? And I said, oh, I didn't have to. My new sewing machine did it. And he's like, it's worth whatever you paid. I don't care what you paid because of this foot. So there's a way to set that up to do a sew on buttons, and I've never sewed a hand button on since I've got that feature because it's just great. This is a binder foot, so if you're doing quilt binding, there's a whole way that you can put this on your machine. Actually, it goes that way, and it'll roll the binding and put it on the edge of the quilt, which is a wonderful way to go. This is a darning foot. Sometimes people will use this for a free motion foot. Turn it around so you can see it. It will work for a free motion foot. It's plastic, so it doesn't wear as well as those steel ones that come with it, but you can also do darning with it, because we all do darning anymore, right? Let's see. This is your walking foot. It attaches typically like most walking feet. I'll be honest with you, I leave my walking foot on my machine almost all the time. This attaches very easily and it's very effective. It's kind of a design that they haven't changed in a long time. These are guides that will pop into the walking foot, so I can use that if I want to do line quilting. It'll also go into the standard foot, so any foot you have on the machine, there's a little place back here where this just slides right in and allows you to push it on there. And then if I'm quilting, I could run a line here, and then I can just keep using that as a reference point to know where to sew that line, and this will push all the way in. So there's two different ones, a little different width and height, so that you can use them in different ways to guide your sewing. So that's the feet needles. This does come with some needles. Needles are proprietary, so you want to put the right needle in the machine and not use a needle that's not going to fit with the bobbin and the hook race assembly, otherwise you can cause damage to the machine. This does do twin needle sewing, which is really kind of cool. For those of you who are working to get a cover hem machine, you can put a twin needle in your sewing machine and get a really nice cover hem. You don't have to buy a whole nother machine because it looks like a cover hem on the bottom, but you still get the twin needle stitch on the top. And then different sizes have different colors on the top. So again, match your needle to your thread to your fabric. It's really an important combination. Oh, here's a cording foot. I don't think we got to the cording feet. There's a couple different cording feet here. These are two cording feet that you can use. You can also use them to use an invisible zipper if you want to do an invisible zipper, which I don't know that anybody's made an invisible zipper in years. I haven't seen one in a long time. Thread, covers. This is to clean out your bobbin case area and dust out the machine. You never want to blow air into your machine. You always want to either suck it out or push it out of the way. And then this is the ever infamous seam ripper. Don't we love our seam rippers? But it does come with a little one that's kind of high. And it's got a nice sharp point on it, so it does work pretty well. So there's still about 4 feet that are missing, but I got to show you where they are. There's this wonderful little hidey ho that I just love. So it's over here on the front of the machine, and I open it up. Ta-da! And what I like about these are probably the feet that I'm going to be using the most often when I'm sewing. And it tells you A, M, D, E, F, but honestly, any foot you want to put in there would be the ones you use. Typically, I'm not going to use this entire assortment of feet all the time, but right in here, and see these just pop out. Is this not cool? This just pops out. So I have in here right now the 1/4 inch foot, because as a quilter, I use a 1/4 inch foot all the time. Actually making bags or whatever I'm doing, I like my 1/4 inch foot. So I've stuck that in there. This does a simulated serger or overcast. So again, you don't have to invest in a serger. You can get double duty out of this machine to get that nice stitch from that foot. This is your rolled hem foot. Now this is for fairly small. It's usually at least a 2 millimeter rolled hem. They'll sell a set that has a 4, a 6, and an 8 millimeter rolled hem. I would recommend buying that if you're going to do very many rolled hems. This is more for your chiffons and lightweight fabrics. It's pretty hard to get a cotton to roll in this 2 millimeter rolled hem foot, but you can do it. It's just tight. This is your zipper foot. So I showed you the concealed zipper, but this is your standard zipper foot. And again, this just hooks on the little bar and you set it either side. Let me show you this one because it kind of confuses people. Let's go down here real quick. So the way you change the feet is this drops. So right now the foot is attached. And if I want to take the foot off, I just push the lever on the back and it's a spring. And then to put the next foot on, I just push this lever down and it picks it right up. And this isn't a perfect example of why I want to move that foot back and forth. So if I'm sewing a zipper foot, or if I'm doing the edge of a bag and I want to get into a tight space, you can see the zipper, there's a hole in the middle, but if I want to sew to one side or the other, I can move my needle over, and now I can get to the edge of something. And this, I can't tell you how many times I've had to get someplace really tight, and see that needle now drops to the left, or I could drop it to the right side. So that's another reason why you want to change your needle position. And then the other foot, the last one here, is this F foot again. This is another decorative, a foot for doing decorative and kind of the embroidery-like stitches. It has the valley so that when you sew those decorative stitches, they have room to pass through. So let's do a decorative stitch real quick, just so we can finish it off here. So again, I'm just going to drop that foot right on, like that. And we're going to go back and we're going to pick the mode, which is also like the drawer. I'm going to close this little puppy up here. So I'm going to pick the mode. Let's do in mode 2, which is, again, think of this as a drawer and all the stitches inside are files. So I'm going to pick mode 2, and let's do number, what do we like here? Let's do number 7. I like that. That's kind of fun. So let's go to the front of the machine here, and I'm going to pick my mode, which is the same as the drawer. So I'm in mode 2. And I want stitch number 7, so 0, 7, and it shows me that stitch, and right here it tells me the F foot. It also is set to lock at the end of the stitch. It's set, stitch width is 4.0. I could probably make that a little bigger, but at some point she's going to lock out and tell me it's too big, and the stitch length is 2.0. So I'm going to put my fabric in place. I'm ready to sew. I'm going to hold my thread because I'm trying to do good technique here. So that kind of just keeps that top thread from bunching up underneath. You can always lift it back out, but it's just nice to start with it. There we go. Now, she's set at about a mid-speed. She's not going super fast. She's not going super slow. I could go fast. It's Christmas Eve. I got to get this project done. I got to really sew. And you see it retains the stitch length. But again, I got a Ferrari. Doesn't mean I always go 300 miles an hour. So now I'm going to push the bullseye button so it can complete the stitch. And you see, even though I pushed the button, it still sewed for a minute because it was locking, and it cut the thread. How awesome is that? And now I have this lovely little snowflake, and both sides even look great. So I don't have to do it right side or wrong side up. So there's your basic stitch on that. It does do the alphabet, so you can, there's a memory feature over here where you can computerize in the memory of how many stitches you want to do in a row, and it'll do the alphabet and spell out names. You can elongate stitches here. This'll, if I've got a stitch that I wanted to make it longer but keep the density, that's what this button does. I can do a mirror image. If I've got a design that's facing one way and I want it to face the other, this button will turn it back and forth. This is just going back and forth between my memory stitches. And then I have some quick buttons here. I can go right to a straight stitch. I can go to the left side. I can go to a quick zigzag, and I can do a quick buttonhole. So they've got some nice features there. I pretty much think that's about everything you can know, at least to get started sewing. Again, if you're going to buy this machine, you're going to get us. You're going to love having our staff available to help you. They'll answer any questions you have as much as they possibly can, and if they don't know the answer, they'll find someone who will. But I encourage you, if you are using this machine or have you purchased it, go through and learn how to do all the stitches. Take the time. Enjoy it. That's what it's for. So, happy stitching.